Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan, His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 8, Free Elections and the Birth of Bangladesh, 1970 to 1971. 3 months earlier, however, in his great tragedy tract, Zulfi had written in support of the military action of March, denouncing all critics of Pakistan the world over as disappointing, if not unfriendly, thanking only China for strong support. The attitude of the British and the American press has been, to say the least, deplorable. In general, the Western press has unashamedly supported the secessionist movement. Prompted by India, the Soviet Union chose to forget her own history, her own military interventions for self preservation, even beyond her borders in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. One of the Bengalis massacred in the first wave of late March was the husband of Husna Ahad, who had been a senior partner in the firm of Or Tigham in Dhaka and a friend of Mujib's. Husna herself had, by then, long since left her husband and was living in Karachi in a house near 70 Clifton, which Zulfi rented for her. Zulfi received many other early and accurate reports of what was happening in war-torn Bangladesh. One of his closest Dhaka friends, Sheikh Kaisar Rashid, wrote from his Dhan Mandi Road home near Mujib's house in April that the enormity of the tragedy here beggars description. I am afraid that every drop of blood outside the most rigid minimum requirement of military operations will leave a trail of abiding bitterness. Please contact Yahya and impress upon him the need not only to issue the strictest possible instructions in this regard, but also to demonstrate their resolve that no infringements will be countenanced. I am sure you are deeply concerned. I would urge you, however, to desist from making any sanctimonious statements. In the context of the situation here, they sound so utterly heartless. It is not true. I would recommend that you come across and see things for yourself. By the end of April, nearly 1 million terrified Bengalis had fled to India, where they remained in refugee camps, ringing Calcutta all the rest of that blood drenched year. The flood tide of refugees stood at over 50,000 a day for 9 months. Yahya's former constitutional advisor, the Bengali Dr. G. W. Chaudhary, returned to Dhaka in late May of 1971. It was the worst experience of my life. Everywhere I went, I heard the same story. One person had lost a son, another a husband. Many villages were burnt. My next meeting with Yahya took place in Rawalpindi. Yahya's first question was what I had seen in Dhaka. My prompt reply was that no single foreign paper had exaggerated. I also told him that it was not only the number of deaths but the manner in which innocent persons had been killed and women raped that had destroyed our cherished homeland for which the Muslims of the subcontinent had sacrificed so many thousands of lives. He looked vacant and seemed unable to talk to me. He knew my devotion to the concept of a united Pakistan, and he also knew that I had never supported Mujib's veiled secessionist plan. He could not therefore dismiss my account as that of a typical secessionist under the influence of India. Then I began a round of visits to a number of other members of the ruling elite. It was a shocking experience to see their attitude. The rebels must be crushed. Then we can talk of any political settlement. A group of the Junta headed by Hamid Pirzada and Omar thought that the problems of East Pakistan had been solved forever by force. Justice Cornelius was asked to prepare a constitution giving autonomy to East Pakistan, but within limits. Yahya told me frankly. The Cornelius constitution was being prepared to deal with Bhutto, who had been demanding that his party should be given effective power. Yahya was not willing to yield to Bhutto's pressure. Moreover, Bhutto was the most hated person in East Bengal, as the Bengalis believed, not without justification, that he, in collaboration with the hawkish generals, had precipitated the crisis. President Nixon said nothing against the Dhaka massacre, but sent his White House security advisor Henry Kissinger to Rawalpindi in early July. Kissinger met with Yahya, who briefed him on his own secret meetings with Mao and Chow, having recently served as Nixon's middleman in helping to open China to US recognition. On 8th July 1971, the press reported that Kissinger's departure from Pakistan had been unexpectedly delayed by intestinal affliction. Actually, he had flown to Peking for his first meeting with Chow and Lai. With Yahya so cooperative and helpful in facilitating secret US diplomacy, it could hardly be expected that the White House would publicly rebuke him for attacking what Kissinger would later refer to as International Basket Case, meaning Bangladesh. India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi moved closer to Moscow at this time and would sign the 20-year Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation with the Soviet Union on 9 August 1971, after being rebuffed by the White House and State Department in her efforts to win US support against Pakistan. Zulfi, like Yahya and Nixon, had never liked Indira Gandhi. All three men often joked about her arrogance, referring to her by a number of deleted expletives, least offensive of which were cow and bitch. Yahya sent Zulfi to Tehran in July to seek more support from the Shah for the war in the east, which had become more costly and militarily exhausting than any of his generals had anticipated. The Democrat controlled US Congress had imposed an embargo of shipments of arms to Pakistan as the news of the genocidal murders reached the West. Iran was one of the closest major storehouses of US weaponry that could be tapped without publicity. The Shah, moreover, was specially friendly to his Shiite neighbors Yahya and Zulfi. From this time at least, Zulfi became a close friend of the Shah, inviting him regularly to Larkana, feeling he could, as a rule, rely on this new Persian king of kings for all sorts of help, financial as well as military. Of course, the Shah could be charming, Zulfi later reflected on his friend, who was in some respects much like himself. He possessed a certain modesty in his vanity. He was superstitious. He had a very good memory. I am not sure about his courage. He was impeccable in manner. He was soft spoken and courteous, punctual to the dot, and hard working, but with mixed up priorities. He was both easy to please and difficult to please. The slightest thing could cause him to misunderstand or misconstrue. He was replete with imaginary grievances. Yahya hoped to reach early agreement with Zulfi on a constitutional scheme that could allow them to share power. On 29th July, Yahya invited Zulfi to bring his Pakistan People's Party team along to confer with him and Pirzada and Justice A.R. Cornelius, their constitutional advisor, in Karachi's government house. Zulfi assured the president that his party had no intention to bring about confrontation with the regime, as this may lead to disaster in the country. He also told Yahya, "We believe in the declarations made by you as president," adding a more personal note. "We know you, and in a personal regime, it is better to deal with the man you know. But if our opponents are put in power, we will oppose them and destroy them. They have no mandate from the people." Sweetening again, he graciously assured Yahya, "You can be the head of state in the next government." Zulfi himself, of course, would be prime minister. He told Yahya, "You may consult other parties. We do not object," but refused absolutely to sit down with the others at any round table conference. He had promised the people a great deal, which posed, as Zulfi now delicately put it, some basic problems, because we cannot give up these or resile from them. Nonetheless, he hoped a satisfactory constitution could be adopted within 120 days of the convening of the new Constituent Assembly. J.A. Rahim, the party's Secretary General, was there at Zulfi's side and remarked, even if Mujibur Rahman's treason had not taken place, the crisis would not have ended with the framing of the constitution. The crisis arises out of property relationship. If we come to power, we would introduce changes. Rahim himself would be one of Zulfi's thorniest problems in years ahead. His mind was as sharp as his tongue, and his memory was as good as Zulfi Bhutto's. Yahya spoke more slowly than either Zulfi or Rahim as he replied, "Good to deal with people you know. I know you. I am a soldier, but we have not come by a coup. Power was thrust on us. We have not come because we wanted to. I am anxious to get the country back upon the rails of democracy. I am myself frightened by my own blind power. Power is with God Almighty. The Constitution is not an ordinary law, and how can you, with your majority in Punjab and Sindh, deny to the people of NWFP or Balochistan their freedom to decide on what conditions they agree? There can be no majority in constitution making. You objected to Mujib's majority bulldozing. Others would object to your bulldozing them. UK has no written constitution. The more important thing is good government. We must have a constitution that is workable and looks after the needs of the people. In meeting you, I am discussing with representatives of the people. I will discuss with other parties, but I cannot consult all 120 million. Don't talk of confrontation with me, he said softly, turning to focus his eyes on Zulfi's tight lipped face. I am not your opponent, but while I am in power, I shall continue to do the job that I am required to do by my position. I want to transfer power to you, but I cannot say who will be in power in the center. Yahya then suggested that the People's Party go east and win the seats in new elections for many vacancies that had been left since the fighting started. He planned to call elections in East Pakistan within 30 days. A week after the confrontation in Karachi, Zulfi's appendix flared up. He was rushed with a high fever on 5th August to a Karachi hospital where Dr. Nasir Sheikh's skillful surgery saved his life. The inflamed appendix had just started to burst, spewing its poison throughout his abdominal cavity. 1 week after the operation, he was able to walk and dictate letters, though it would be another fortnight before he could return to his normal fast pace. On 25th August, he met again with Yahya and Pirzada to discuss the situation in East Pakistan. Yahya informed Zulfi of his reasons for wanting to appoint the unpopular Dr. A. M. Malik as civilian governor of East Pakistan a week later. I told the president that his decision vindicated the position I had taken right from March 27th, when I met you in Karachi. Zulfi wrote Pirzada that military action was inadequate unless accompanied by a political initiative. However, I wish to reiterate that the appointment of a civilian governor is not the same as the introduction of a democratic process, which I have called for. Zulfi feared that Yahya was planning another conspiracy against him, much as Ayub had tried to do by inviting Mujib to the Round Table Conference in 1969. He warned Pirzada on 2nd September, I have, in the national interest, refrained from enlarging upon my views in the public and to the press in order to avoid inflaming public opinion at such a critical juncture. But time was running out, he insisted, sending the letter with G. M. Khar, whom he asked not to deliver it but to set the time for Zulfi's next meeting with Yahya on 9th September. Bhutto had wanted the meeting in Karachi, but Yahya invited him to Islamabad. Zulfi politely declined, sending another longer letter through Khar directly to Yahya in Rawalpindi on 8th September. In it, he called for clear-cut decisions and initiatives to be taken immediately. An anguished and disturbed nation wants to know its fate, Zulfi wrote. History is an exacting judge. Without prejudice or rancor, All of us must address ourselves to the central task, the survival of Pakistan. We simply cannot act in pique. Destiny has placed in your hands and in ours an onerous responsibility. Being answerable to God and our people, we are determined to arrive at a lasting solution acceptable to the people of a united Pakistan. Zulfi addressed a meeting of People's Party workers in Hyderabad that same day, making public his growing frustration with Yahya. The president should take an immediate decision. I am 43 and I have the strength and courage to organize a movement. Zulfi labeled those who opposed immediate transfer of power toadies and conspirators and cautioned them to cease their conspiracies. We will defeat all enemies of the people. 3 days later, he addressed a larger crowd at the mausoleum of Quaid-e-Azam Jinnah in Karachi, declaiming, Brothers, as Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, an individual, I am nothing. You are my power and my strength. No government in the world can solve its problems without the cooperation and support of its people. No problem can be solved through oppression, through bullets, through force. A few months ago, when I said this first, a number of sycophants and defeated politicians said that this amounted to treachery. Had democracy been restored, then we would not be in this sorry state today. What happened in East Pakistan can happen in West Pakistan as well. But I warn the powers that be that we will not permit bloodshed here. We will not permit another Jallianwala Bagh. The Quaid-e-Azam made Pakistan with the sacrifices of the people. Oh, my Qaid, did you dream of the Pakistan that we are living in today? Was it your concept, your dream? He was a Democrat and he respected the democratic process. He said that the constitution will be made by the elected representatives of the people. Speak, speak, my Qaid. When will this night of oppression end? For God's sake, restore democracy. On 18th September, after a long meeting with Zulfi in Karachi, Yahya pledged that before year's end, a new constituent assembly would be convened once by-elections were completed in East Pakistan, if that were possible. Then constitutional governments should be formed both at the center and in the provinces. Zulfi announced at the subsequent press conference, pretending to believe that both wings of Pakistan could remain under a single government. We believe the main task before us today is to save the country, Zulfi said on 29th September. Nobody wants war, but if there is war, it will be a total war, which must mean the total participation of the people. Zulfi was still ready for a 1,000-year war with India and believed himself better qualified than Yahya to lead Pakistan to victory. He was not totally unaware, however, of Pakistan's perilous state and the weaknesses of its shattered economy as well as polity. East Pakistan is in flames. The whole country is in near ruin. How will Pakistan be rescued if new fires are to erupt in other parts of the country? And erupt they will if the people's rights are not recognized. Our demands on behalf of the people are for the solidarity of the country and the well-being of the people as a whole, and totally different from those of the Awami League, whose leadership sought to wreck Pakistan. We simply cannot be tarred with the same brush. It would be a monstrous injustice to the people of Pakistan to equate the two. Patriots and traitors cannot be equated. The Pakistan People's Party is not in league with India, Pakistan's mortal enemy, to destroy our nationhood. By September, Yahya's new Inter-Services Intelligence Chief, Major General Gilani, reported sizable Indian troops movement towards the Bengal border and heavy Soviet shipments of arms into India. Yahya also knew, as Indira Gandhi did, that India was paying more every month simply to feed and shelter the millions of Bangladesh refugees squatting around Calcutta than she had for the entire war of 1965. To seize the moment, in late September, Yahya conveyed a secret peace plan promising, in effect, immediate implementation of all 6 points to Indira Gandhi through her new ambassador in Islamabad, Jai Kumar Atal. But now that Indira had her Soviet backing, she did not bother to respond to such clandestine overtures. Once the monsoon stopped and rivers level dropped, India's assembled forces would begin an irresistible move across the eastern border. The moderate Bengali elder statesman Nurul Amin was appointed Prime Minister of Pakistan by Yahya on the eve of the Indian invasion. Yahya remained president and offered Bhutto two cabinet posts, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs. Zulfi refused at first, insulted at the thought of being number two to a Bengali less popular than Mujib. I told the president that his advisers were misleading him. I told him they were like cobras. Zulfi announced at a public meeting in Multan that October. And you must have read in the papers that they found cobras in the president's house, Karachi. Every war is fought on a political level, Zulfi argued. If the people of Pakistan are not with the government, how will it face the enemy successfully? They are talking of a total war. If it is going to be a total war, then the people cannot be ignored. We are their representatives. We need time to consolidate the country. At least 6 months. Pakistan had less than 2 months left, however. By mid November, Indian military sorties began crossing the Bangladesh border, probing Pakistan's soft defenses. With less than 100,000 fighting men in all of the East Wing, the Pakistan army was barely able to control the disaffected millions of unarmed Bengalis. It proved no match for India's forces led by Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, under the overall command of General, later Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw and their Soviet weaponry. Indira Gandhi flew to Washington that November, but heard nothing from Nixon or Kissinger to convince her that Pakistan's leaders deserved more time to work out an acceptable constitution. We are told that the confrontation of troops is a threat to peace, she said on the eve of her departure from Washington. Is there any peace when a whole people are massacred? Will the world be concerned only if people die because of war between two countries and not if hundreds of thousands are butchered and expelled by a military regime waging war against the people? Zulfi accepted Yahya's urgent invitation to fly to Peking as Pakistan's special envoy to request Chinese military support should India invade in the east. Mao and Chao promised him everything, but when Islamabad's desperate calls went out 2 weeks later, China delivered virtually nothing. On the morning of 22nd November 1971, India's tanks and troop-filled trucks crossed the border of North Calcutta, rolling towards Jessore. Pakistan's ambassador to the United States, General Raza, called a press conference in Washington to announce the attack, and when asked by one of the reporters if war was imminent, the ambassador irately replied, "It is not imminent, but it is on." 2 days later, Zulfi received a top secret message from one of his confidants in the president's secretariat, informing him that any day now you should become the prime minister to our great delight, and going on to advise him that once the back of Indian forces is broken the east, Pakistan should occupy the whole of eastern India and make it a permanent part of East Pakistan. This will provide a physical link with China. Kashmir should be taken at any price, even the Sikh Punjab, and turned into Khalistan. Zulfi thought enough of this letter to keep it in his Karachi library, though the anxious author postscribed the request. Kindly destroy this letter immediately after you have seen it. The next day, 25th November, Zulfi met with Yahya, who now took him fully into his confidence, hoping to remain the president in a new government with Zulfi as prime minister. As soon as the war ended, old Nurul Amin would be displaced. Of course, because Yahya and Zulfi knew he was a mere Bengali window dressing for the outside world. What Yahya himself did not as yet understand was that he too would soon be jettisoned by his ambitious new ally. I did not consider it necessary to go into certain matters at the meeting. Zulfi wrote the tottering president a few days later in prefacing comments on a proposed constitution, some features of which he believed were unwarranted. A constitution should be rooted in reality, and that meant that a parliamentary federal system was unavoidable and imperative. A principal cause of Pakistan's calamitous situation was its quasi unitary system and a decade of presidential dictatorship. In any parliamentary system, the main executive authority is vested in the Prime Minister. You now propose to give constitutional sanctity to the office of the President, combining it with that of the Commander in Chief of the Army, endowing the President, moreover, with emergency powers and to some extent martial law powers too. Foolish Yahya thought he might be able to work in harness with Zulfi, for were they not hunting buddies and strong thinking Shiite friends? With so much power to be vested in the president, who could have wrongly advised you to top it all by conferring upon the president the disproportionate and provocative special responsibilities for the preservation of the integrity and ideology of Pakistan and for the protection of fundamental rights? This provision casts an aspersion on the patriotism of every elected representatives and puts the whole nation under a cloud of suspicion. It arrogates to an individual the sole authority and wisdom to determine the loyalty and affection of the whole populace to the motherland. We do not want a dud president. We want an effective president, but not as under a scheme a virtual dictator. Democracy has its own rules, and once it comes into play, such a travesty can only drive a thwarted nation onto a collusion course. The scheme will not work. I therefore urge you to delete this provision before the Constitution is promulgated to avert a major crisis. Zulfi had other criticisms. Governors should be appointed on the recommendations of the Chief Minister concerned. You, Mr. President, have said that the power to appoint governors must rest with you, as you want to appoint non party men to this position. I can only say that no person is above party. Man is a political animal. Yahya had hoped to remain president for at least 2 terms under the new constitution, but when Zulfi demurred, this would simply not be acceptable to the people of Pakistan. He agreed to continue to hold office for the first fixed term and then stand for election to the second term. Now Zulfi cautioned him. Even this one-term proposal was subject to the approval of my Central Committee. A week later, on 2nd December, Zulfi wrote Pirzada to report that the Central Committee had discussed the situation and urged me to draw the regime's attention to many new problems. The people have lost faith in the government riddled with contradictions, sensitive to the dictates of foreign powers, and which in no way represents them. Today, position is that a war is on and massive mobilization is required. Instead, pitiful mistakes are being made. The impression is that India is giving us a kicking in East Pakistan and we are on our knees begging foreign powers to come help us. The next day, Yahya invited Zulfi to join as Deputy Prime Minister, a coalition government with Nurul Amin. Bhutto responded, "It goes without saying that if Pakistan People's Party accepts this invitation, it would be making a great deal of sacrifice in the supreme national interest." Zulfi then went on to spell out our understanding that the coalition would consist of 7 East Wing ministers and 6 from the West, none of whom should be members of the religious Jamaat-e-Islami party, which had consistently attacked Bhutto and his party as anti-Islam. 5 of the 6 ministers from West should be Pakistan People Party ministers from Sindh and Punjab and would control the foreign affairs, home establishment, and information and broadcasting ministries in addition to the deputy prime ministership. The crisis facing Pakistan today is total, Zulfi summed up. Although the National Assembly is, according to the timetable put forward by you, not to meet till the 27th of December. We can join the coalition government with immediate effect, provided our minimum terms are fulfilled. The critical situation does not brook delay. Zulfi was back in harness, returning to a military government post similar to the one he had left 5 years earlier. Only this time, the military president and Pakistan itself were both about to fall.